Miles had never expected his grandmother's old cafe to become the scene of supernatural chaos. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of Grandma Beatrice's beloved establishment, flipping the sign on the door from closed to open and hoping that the fresh layer of paint, the updated menu, and the new cappuccino machine would keep the business afloat. He didn't mind the early mornings or the late nights. Grams had worked herself to the bone to keep the doors open for decades, and now that it was his turn, he was determined not to disappoint her or any of her loyal patrons. It had been 3 weeks since Miles took over, and things were finally falling into place. The espresso machines squealed with reliability, the ovens hummed steadily, and his small staff seemed content. But one thing still felt off. Since day one, he'd detected the faintest sense of being watched. Late at night, when he was certain he was alone, the overhead lights flickered in a way that suggested someone was playing with the switches. The dull hum of the refrigerators would briefly waver into an odd, ghostly moan. Sometimes, just out of the corner of his eye, a transparent shape seemed to flit behind a row of antique mixing bowls. He attributed it to exhaustion until one evening after closing, it literally slammed into him. He was sweeping flour from the floor when an invisible force tackled him right into the counter. Thankfully, nothing broke, except for a bit of his dignity. "What in the world?" Miles croaked, heart pounding. A faint glow coalesced before him, a short, jittery figure wearing an apron, of all things, and a lopsided chef's hat that slipped over one eye. The ghostly being was almost see-through but radiant around the edges, as if illuminated by an otherworldly lamp. It seemed just as surprised to have made contact with Miles. For a moment, they stared at one another in mutual embarrassment. "You can see me?" the figure asked, voice quivering. Miles tried to respond but managed only a kind of squeak, like he was opening a squeaky door. "Sorry I gave you a shove," the ghost offered. "I was wandering around, checking out the new setup. Didn't expect you to walk right through me." They both stepped back. Miles' broom handle slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. He swallowed hard. "Who? Who are you?" he asked. The ghost tapped its chest proudly. "I'm Cornelius Wilford Crispin, master baker. Well, I was a master baker back in 1895. I kicked the proverbial bucket mid-whisk, you see. Heart attack from too much excitement over a triple chocolate sponge. And since then, I've been drifting around, looking for the perfect place to keep on baking." Miles, still finding it difficult to accept he was conversing with a floating apparition in a chef's hat, fumbled for a response. "And you decided this cafe is where you'd continue your career?" "I'm easily drawn to the smell of sugar and butter," Cornelius said, eyes shining, "and the ovens here are quite magnificent compared to what was available in my day. Just look at these dials and the LED screens. Your technology is a marvel. It's like magic." Miles glanced around, then remembered all the weird fluctuations in the appliances. So you were the one making the ovens flicker and the fridges hum strangely?" Cornelius rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "I'm still figuring out how to interact with the modern contraptions. Sometimes I can float right through them, sometimes I get stuck, but mostly I just want to bake. I can't rest until I've created the perfect pastry. I'm going for gold in the Great Ghost Bake-Off, you see." Initially, Miles assumed those words were a piece of comedic babble, but the ghost looked committed. "The what?" Cornelius's eyes sparkled. "The Great Ghost Bake-Off. It's a spectral baking competition for ghosts who never completed their signature recipes in life. We gather every All Hallows Eve to present our best creations to a panel of ghost judges. It's a serious, once-in-a-lifetime event, or afterlife, I suppose." Suddenly, Miles found himself leaning in with interest. "Sounds intense, but how are you planning to bake cupcakes if you don't even have hands to hold a whisk?" Cornelius winked. "Oh, I've got my ways. Poltergeist tricks, you know. I can move objects with telekinesis, though it tends to spook people when spoons stir by themselves. I've been practicing. Problem is I'm horribly out of practice with the actual recipes. That's why I'm rummaging around your lovely cafe. I want to put these fancy new machines to good use and make the best haunted cupcakes anyone alive or dead has ever tasted. Miles felt torn. On the one hand, a poltergeist rummaging around his cafe at night might scare away staff and customers. On the other, the ghost seemed strangely enthusiastic, almost charming in an old-fashioned way. Besides, if Miles helped him, it might keep Cornelius from inadvertently destroying equipment with his spectral meddling. "All right," Miles said, taking a calculated risk. "How about we test your baking after closing hours so you don't scare the customers? If you can figure out how to operate the equipment without blowing any fuses, I'll provide the ingredients. Deal?" Cornelius's grin nearly split his translucent face in two. Deal. That was how it all started. An unlikely partnership to perfect ghostly cupcakes. The next few nights, after Miles flipped the sign to closed and the final stragglers left with their to-go latte cups, Cornelius appeared. He usually floated through the wall or popped out of the supply closet, nearly causing Miles to drop a container of sugar more than once. Together, they'd prep the mixing bowls and line up all the ingredients, Miles in the flesh and Cornelius in spirit. Early on, it was a disaster. Cornelius insisted on measuring everything in grams, which was helpful, yet he couldn't manipulate small objects with precision. He'd attempt to crack an egg telekinetically, only for it to burst in midair, coating the new mixer with sticky yolk. The ghost discovered the joy of modern stand mixers, but forgot about the speed settings. In a swirl of flour, sugar, and cocoa powder, a whole batch of batter ended up flung against the ceiling. Miles's eyes burned with exhaustion as he wiped cake dough from the overhead lamps, yet bit by bit, improvement came. Cornelius read up on modern baking techniques using old cookbooks he borrowed from the secondhand bookstore next door. He insisted he would return them, albeit they might smell a bit spectral. He drilled the basics, sifting flour carefully, whipping eggs just right, balancing the sweetness. Despite the fiascos, there were glimpses of success. A swirl of luscious chocolate batter that smelled heavenly. A swirl of vanilla frosting, so light and airy that it looked like an enchanted cloud. All the while, the cafe's appliances began behaving oddly in more comedic fashion. The toaster occasionally popped without warning, catapulting slices of bread halfway across the room. The microwave beeped in Morse code. Miles somehow learned to differentiate small bursts of ghost energy from a typical power surge. Still, he couldn't exactly complain to the local electrician that his cafe was haunted by a 19th century ghost who wanted to be a champion baker. By the end of the second week, Miles' curiosity got the better of him, and he asked the question that had been gnawing at him. "Cornelius, if there's a Great Ghost Bake-Off, aren't there others, like you? And how do you all even judge the finished product?" Cornelius laid a whisk gently on the counter. "Oh, there are plenty of ghosts. Bakers, chefs, pastry enthusiasts, all lost in the pursuit of their dream recipe. The competition is intense. Some ghosts can produce illusions of taste for the judges, casting what you might call a phantom flavor. Others try to recruit living helpers to sample the real pastries. Everyone's looking for that golden rolling pin, the ultimate prize. But I have a secret edge. I'm planning to bake with real physical ingredients. The judges will sense the difference right away. The realness of the batter, the honest swirl of frosting on a tangible cupcake. It'll blow their spectral socks off." Miles let out a low whistle. "That sounds ambitious. But if you're serious, you'll need help from more than just me. Which is why I'd like to ask if you'd be my sous chef." Cornelius hovered a little closer. "I can't exactly chat with the friendly farmers at the market for fresh eggs, or politely ask the manager at the supermarket for the best flour in stock. And my ghostly presence can scare ordinary folks." Unsure if he'd regret it, Miles nodded. "All right, you've got yourself a living sous chef, but only if you promise not to blow up the cappuccino machine again." "Agreed," Cornelius said, Over the following days, Miles juggled the cafe's regular business with secret side trips to gather top-notch baking supplies. Cornelius insisted on trying only the highest quality vanilla extract, the freshest butter, and cocoa powder with the richest aroma. At times, while Miles was in the store, he'd sense a light chill dart around him as Cornelius flitted invisibly nearby, peeking with curiosity at the shelves, almost like an overly excitable puppy. It was during one of these ventures that trouble arose. Miles had just arrived back from the local farmer's market with crates of eggs and sacks of flour. He stepped inside the cafe after hours. Flicking on the light, he noticed an unusual hush. Normally, Cornelius would pop out with an enthusiastic greeting or fling a spatula across the room to show he was ready for a night of baking. But this time, the place felt too calm. Suddenly, the ovens roared to life with an eerie clang. The overhead fans whirled untamed, blowing old receipts across the countertops. Something heavy thudded inside the walk-in freezer. Every piece of equipment in the kitchen seemed possessed. But this time, it wasn't that familiar comical chaos. It was more frantic, like someone had cast a furious poltergeist storm inside the cafe. "Cornelius!" Miles shouted over the din. "Is that you?" Out from behind the large industrial mixer floated a different apparition. This ghost was taller, with a stiff posture and a scowl that would sour milk. Unlike Cornelius, who exuded a sense of warmth despite his spectral form, this newcomer's presence caused a chill to settle in Miles's bones. The ghost wore a chef's uniform reminiscent of the early 1900s, a starched white jacket with a tall toque perched on his head. "Where is that scoundrel, Crispin?" the ghost demanded sharply, his voice echoing. "I heard rumors of his meddling with living ovens, trying to cheat his way to victory in the bake-off. I will not allow a second-rate poltergeist to outshine me. I, Barnabas K. Montague, champion spirit of the pastry world, will remain undefeated." Miles's mouth hung open. He dropped the crate of eggs, which splattered onto the tile floor. "Second-rate poltergeist? That's not true. Cornelius is just practicing." Montague let out a haughty laugh. "Practicing to fail, I presume. Nobody can best me in a haunting or in a baking challenge. I've perfected the art of harnessing spectral energy to make my confections truly terrifying and delicious." "Where is Crispin?" Miles hesitated. He knew Cornelius was stashed in the back, rummaging for piping bags, but the last thing Miles wanted was for Montague to corner him in a fit of ghostly rage. "He's not here. You might want to come back tomorrow." A string of overhead lights flickered in response to the ghost's anger. "Don't lie to me, mortal boy. I can sense Crispin's presence. I've come to deliver a warning. If Crispin so much as tries to overshadow me in this year's bake-off, I will personally make sure his batter collapses. Permanently." Montague glided menacingly closer, and Miles instinctively retreated. Just then, the freezer door swung open with enough force to clatter against the wall. Cornelius emerged, trembling at first, but wearing a determined expression. "You always were a pompous blowhard, Montague," Cornelius said, voice shaking despite his efforts to appear brave. "I'm not afraid of you this time around." "Bold words for a pastry amateur," Montague sneered. "You think you can produce better haunted cupcakes than me? Your illusions are pitiful. Your telekinesis is subpar, and you rely on a mortal to do your errands? Tisk tisk, Crispin, it's shameful." Cornelius squared his shoulders. "I don't rely on illusions. My cupcakes are real, made with genuine ingredients. No ghost illusions. Real sugar, real butter, real flavor. The judges will taste that sincerity in every bite." Montague's eyes narrowed. "You're a fool. Ghost illusions can conjure the perfect taste without the constraints of the physical world. You think your mortal baking will impress them? Ha! You stand no chance." With that, Montague waved an otherworldly hand, causing the ovens to spark violently. Miles yelled in alarm, darting over to switch them off at the breaker. Cornelius, incensed, hurled a bag of flour telekinetically, which erupted into a cloud of white powder that coated Montague's ghostly form. Though intangible, Montague seemed affronted by the mocking display. He vanished into thin air with a last ominous warning. "Haunt my words, Crispin. Stay out of my way or face my wrath." For a long moment, the only sound was the hush of settling flour. Miles coughed and wiped the dust from his eyes. Cornelius hovered nearby, shoulders sagging. "Sorry about the mess," he said quietly. Montague will do anything to keep the title. He's never been beaten, not in life and not in death. That's why so few ghosts even dare to challenge him. His illusions are mesmerizing. He can conjure entire banquets out of thin air. But they're not real. He taught me a cruel lesson years ago. Illusions can cause heartbreak when you realize they vanish at the stroke of midnight. Miles patted flour from his shirt. You okay? Cornelius gave a tentative nod. I'll be fine. But now you see what I'm up against. Montague is prepared to wreck my chances at every turn. If we're going to do this, we need to up our game. Miles offered a wry grin. Let's whip up some world-class haunted cupcakes, together. We'll show that blowhard what a little teamwork can do. Cornelius clapped his ghostly hands, sending a swirl of flour floating in the air like sparkly dust. Deal. The following night, they laid out the blueprint for their ultimate cupcake, a layered chocolate vanilla swirl base, topped with buttercream so smooth it could melt on the tongue, then finished with a drizzle of salted caramel that would leave any taste tester begging for more. Cornelius insisted on an extra twist, a haunting swirl of black food coloring that would give the frosting a spooky sheen. They'd decorate with candied sugar ghosts perched on the top of each cupcake, just enough to reflect the paranormal flair. Miles handled the measuring and mixing. Cornelius delicately guided the spatula, swirling batter in ways only a phantom might, coaxing out subtle ribbons of flavor. By 2 a.m, every countertop was covered with trays of cooling cupcakes, each one a miniature masterpiece. Then came the big test tasting. Cornelius initially fretted he couldn't truly taste them, but to measure success for the bake-off, he'd rely on Miles' taste buds and see if the cupcake's essence was strong enough to create a ghost echo for the spectral judges. Miles peeled back a wrapper, took a bite, and nearly melted with joy. The crumb was moist, the chocolate and vanilla balanced, and the frosting velvety. He moaned in delight, giving Cornelius a triumphant thumbs up. I think we've got ourselves a winner. Cornelius beamed, drifting upward in excitement. It's perfect. I can sense how decadent it is. The flavor resonates in the astral plane. This is it, Miles. This is how we'll beat Montague. Relieved and thrilled, they cleaned up, or at least Miles did. Cornelius tried to telekinetically sweep, but ended up chasing dust bunnies around like a playful puppy. Too exhausted to worry further about ghostly sabotage, Miles locked the cafe and went home, sleeping with the sweet memory of that cupcake on his lips. The night of the bake-off arrived. Halloween. Miles had never imagined the cafe would host a spectral competition, but there he was, pacing around the kitchen, wearing an apron printed with goofy cartoon ghosts. Cornelius floated about, flickering with nerves. They had arranged everything, the best ingredients for a fresh batch of their haunted cupcakes, the piping bags with special black frosting, the candy decorations formed into tiny ghost shapes. The plan was to finish them just as the spectral judges arrived in the midnight hour, so the cupcakes would be at their prime. At 11:30, the cafe lights began to flicker. Miles watched as, one by one, ghostly figures drifted through the walls. Some had aprons stained with phantom frosting, others wore ghostly chef toques, angled at jaunty angles. They congregated around the cafe table, shooting curious glances at Miles, who tried his best to stay calm. The atmosphere felt like a culinary underworld come to life. Finally, 3 regal, transparent beings appeared near the register. They wore elaborate judges' robes embroidered with swirling patterns. Their stern gazes signaled the seriousness of the competition. Cornelius trembled, but managed to approach them. Honored judges, welcome! I present my entry for the Great Ghost Bake-Off, real cupcakes, prepared by hand and spirit alike. Before the panel could reply, Montague announced his arrival in dramatic fashion. Swirling in on a gust of cold wind, he waved his arms, and an entire table shimmered into existence, piled high with cakes that glowed with an unnatural light. Perfectly sculpted sugar roses, swirling pastel frostings, and illusions of sparkling glazes shimmered under the cafe's fluorescent lights. One of the judges gasped in admiration, clearly impressed by Montague's conjuring skills. I see Crispin is up to his mortal meekness, Montague scoffed as he eyed Cornelius's straightforward display of cupcakes. Pity. The judges will pity you, Crispin. Cornelius tensed, but Miles nudged him gently. Stay calm. We've got this. One by one, other ghost bakers presented ghostly macaroons, spectral soufflés, and phantom pies. The judges sampled them, passing intangible spoons through the illusions. They made polite remarks, but didn't seem overwhelmed. Finally, it was Montague's turn. He swept a hand over his conjured creations, producing plates that shimmered. The judges leaned in to taste them, if taste was even the right word, since they were illusions. Yet the judges' expressions grew dreamy and euphoric, as if sinking their teeth into exquisite pastries. One judge murmured, "Such perfect flavor, such artistry." Montague crossed his arms smugly. You cannot resist the enchantment of perfection. And then Cornelius stepped forward. If you please, judges, I offer you something real. He nodded at Miles, who quickly divvied up the cupcakes onto a silver tray. He set them on the judge's table. The apparition studied the physical pastries in fascination. They reached out ghostly hands. And to Miles's shock, the cupcakes wavered, as if partly ephemeral. Cornelius had imbued them with enough spectral energy to let the spirits hold them, as if their intangible fingers were tangible for a moment. Cautiously, each judge took a bite. While illusions typically made them react with immediate delight, these real morsels caused a momentary stillness, as if the ghosts were searching their long-lost memories for the sensation of truly tasting again. Then, a slow ripple of astonishment spread over their near-transparent faces. One judge's eyes widened, another closed their eyes in rapture. "This is extraordinary," one judge whispered, voice trembling. "I can sense it even more deeply than a conjured taste. It's real butter, real sugar, both in the physical and spectral sense." Priceless tears shimmered on the judge's spectral cheeks. Every ghost present leaned in, enthralled by the raw emotion radiating from the judging table. Even Montague, for the first time, looked caught off guard. The head judge cleared her throat. "Mies Cupcakes, awaken part of ourselves we thought lost. We can feel the warmth of an oven, the richness of chocolate, the sweetness that once graced our living tongues. This is the reason we bake, is it not? To share something truly special?" A hush fell over the entire cafe. Montague's illusions seemed to dim. He tried to object, but words failed him. Cornelius offered a polite bow. "Thank you," he said, voice quivering, "for giving me this opportunity to show you a real taste of life." The judges exchanged nods, then compiled their scores in hushed conversation. When they faced the gathering of ghost bakers again, the head judge spoke. "We declare Cornelius Wilfred Crispin the winner of this year's Great Ghost Bake-Off." Ghostly applause echoed. Cornelius's eyes brimmed with unshed tears of joy. Montague's form flickered in fury, but the illusions around him melted like cotton candy in a downpour. He shot Cornelius a glare that could curdle fresh milk, but said nothing. Then he vanished in a gust of cold air, presumably to brood and plot for next year. A shimmering golden rolling pin appeared in the judge's hands. Devoutly, they presented it to Cornelius. The moment his ghostly palm touched it, it radiated with a warm, comforting glow, as though it was meant to find its way to him. Miles thought that might be the end of his supernatural odyssey, but as dawn approached and the last stray ghosts bade their farewells, he noticed Cornelius hovering near the ovens, staring at the rolling pin with a thoughtful smile. "You did it!" Miles cried with excitement, patting Cornelius on the back, a gesture that caused his hand to briefly pass through the ghost's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you!" A quiet breeze rattled through the cafe as Cornelius turned to him. "Thank you, Miles. I truly couldn't have done this without you. But there's something I must do now." Miles's stomach plummeted. He sensed a goodbye approaching. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Cornelius tried to smile. "Winning the bake-off was my unfinished business. It was the reason I was bound to this realm. I've dreamed of this moment since I collapsed mid-whisk all those years ago. Now, I feel a pull, like a door waiting to open. I think it's time for me to rest in peace." "Oh," Miles rubbed the back of his neck, feeling unexpectedly tearful. I knew that. I guess I never thought about what would happen afterward. We became sort of a team, you know? A glimmer of sadness passed across Cornelius's face. I know. I'll miss our late-night baking sessions, messing up your counters with flour and scaring the daylights out of you by popping out of the cake fridge. He chuckled softly, then he held up the rolling pin. I'd like you to keep this, if you'd permit. It's a magical artifact for ghosts, so I suspect it might vanish if I truly depart, but consider it a memory of our victory. Perhaps it'll inspire you to keep baking with the same passion we shared. Miles's eyes misted over. He might have been wearing too much flour in the air. Of course. Thank you. I'll hang it on the wall, right next to all of Grandma Beatrice's old awards. They'd be perfect. Cornelius paused, looking at the neat rows of appliances and cooling racks. I'll see myself out. Don't worry, I won't go messing up the cappuccino machine for old time's sake. They both laughed, though tears threatened to spill from Miles' eyes. Cornelius floated toward the back door, then turned. Miles, this new cafe of yours, it's bound to thrive. You've got heart. People sense that. And occasionally, if you feel a cold breeze at night, well, maybe I'm just dropping by to smell the muffins. The ghostly baker waved goodbye, translucent figure illuminated by the earliest morning light seeping through the kitchen window. Then, gently, he faded away. Miles stood still for a long time, listening to the quiet that followed. Instead of feeling spooky or eerie, it just felt peaceful, full of possibility. Life at the cafe carried on. Miles served lattes and croissants, greeted customers with a smile, and tried to keep up with the morning rush. Regulars occasionally asked if the place felt less drafty, though no one ever guessed the real reason behind that ghostly chill. The appliances no longer misbehaved, and the storeroom lights no longer flickered. Many nights, when Miles locked up, he paused by a small glass case mounted on the wall, where he'd placed the shining golden rolling pin. It hadn't disappeared, it just hung there, a testament to an impossible collaboration. Now and then he swore it radiated a faint glow, especially if he was daydreaming about new recipes, even though he knew that could just be his imagination. One night, feeling nostalgic, Miles tried out Cornelius's recipe for haunted cupcakes all by himself. He measured the ingredients carefully, recalled the tips and tricks the ghost had shared. As the batter came together, all those memories floated back. The swirl of dark and light, the aromatic sweetness, the sense of wonder. When Miles slipped them into the oven, he nearly expected flour to come flying out or the appliances to jolt unexpectedly. But everything remained calm, humming contentedly. When the timer dinged, he pulled out a perfect batch of chocolate vanilla swirl cupcakes. He piped on the black buttercream with swirling artistry, topping each with a tiny sugar ghost. Biting into one, he closed his eyes and let the flavors dance on his tongue. For a fleeting moment, he felt a gentle, cold breeze brush past his ear, almost like a whispered, "Well done." He looked around, half expecting to see Cornelius's short, glowing figure celebrating the success. There was no one else there, of course, just an empty, quiet cafe. Yet Miles smiled anyway because he understood the truth. Sometimes real magic happens when you combine warmth, friendship, and a dash of courage, even if the co-baker used to be a ghost in a chef's hat. Outside, the neon sign in the window winked brightly, calling to passers-by like a beacon of comfort in the dark. And inside, restless spirits no longer roamed the ovens, but the memory of them, of one particularly determined ghost, remained, mingling with the aroma of freshly baked cupcakes. And for Miles, that was the sweetest thing of all.